Holliston, welcome to the August 2nd, 2021 Select Board meeting. We are going to start by inviting Peter Barbieri up to the table to discuss what looks to be the beginning of preparing for the 300th anniversary or birthday celebration for the town of Holliston, which will be December 3rd, 2024. We turn 300.
That's the incorporation date, yes, of the town. So, all right.
Nice to have you here.
Right, on behalf of Celebrate Holliston. We have started preliminary discussions from the viewpoint of the events for the 300th. As you know, it's 3 years away. For the 275th, we started deliberations about this same period of time. The biggest thing from the viewpoint of time frame is a parade. So we have, of course, with our annual Celebrate Holliston, a little parade, but as with the 275th, we're probably talking anywhere from 2 to 2.5 hours. The budget with that will probably run between $30,000 and $50,000. We're going to need a lot of assistance from the police department and the fire department and other organizations in town. That's the biggest lead time if we want to get good bands and good vendors and everything else. So I've had a number of discussions over the last month or so with different parade organizers from Marlboro and Natick, Framingham. Framingham hasn't done it in a period of time. So we're getting some good contact information to make it really an event like the 275th was. And as I said, depending upon prices at that time and how big it gets, that could be about $30,000 to $50,000. Right now, for all this planning, Celebrate Holliston, because we've been setting aside money since 1995 when we did it the first time. So we presently have about $100,000 to organize events and to do things and to work with other groups. I sent around today, if you got the kind of the schedule of calendar from the 275th, a lot of other groups in town, you know, worked and did a number of events that Celebrate Holliston kind of organized the publicity and the calendar. We funded, you know, some of those events that people didn't necessarily have the money to start off. And we provided volunteers and everything else. And we hope to play the same role with everybody to kind of coordinate everything, make sure everybody's on the same page, provide some funding if people need it, volunteers if people need it. And that's what we're looking at. But I think the hope is to have, you know, kind of a minimum of one event, you know, each month, culminating in, you know, an anniversary ball, dance, whatever you want to call it, you know, around December 3rd of 2024, which is the date of incorporation. So we'd start in January of 24 and end up, you know, in December with that event. That's kind of where we're at now. As you know, we're planning for this year's Celebrate Holliston, which is a little bit different than what we've had in the past. And we're, because of the COVID situations, kind of downplaying it a little bit. So we're having a street festival along Central Street. So we're busy in the planning process of that. So all this effort is kind of taking a little bit of a backseat until that event is over. And then I think we'll have a couple of meetings in and of ourselves through the fall, maybe into January, February. And then I think the anticipation is with our annual meeting where we invite all organizations in town to our annual meeting. We'll give them enough notice to hope that we'll get those out. You saw that list. You see a number of organizations in town did other events, whether it was a historical society doing somebody, the Lions did it, whether it was a road race. We'd like to go back, even if Celebrate Holliston, to, you know, a day at the lake and have the canoe races and all those type of things. So there's a lot of things to be done, a lot of coordination that has to take place, but we're excited about it and looking forward, and hopefully all of the other groups in town, from the churches, the Lions Club, Rotary, all those organizations, in addition to 1 month, you know, one event a month, maybe we have more because we can get more people involved in more event stuff. So that's where we're at this stage.
Great. Okay. I've got some questions that I'm sure John and Ben do as well. So, John,
well, first, thanks for coming in, Pete. We really appreciate it. This has been on our radar for a few months, and I was happy to hear that Celebrate Holliston is in front of this project already, part of a charge that you got years ago. And I'm glad you're involved. In case I missed it, does Celebrate Holliston envision doing fundraising with private, commercial entities and doing any outreach to local businesses and so
Yeah,
forth?
well, we do, quote sponsorship as part of our annual field day event. And we haven't had a detailed discussion of that, but usually when they do that, when you sponsor something, depending upon the level of the sponsorship, then you get more publicity at either the whole show or anything else that happens this year. Whether, and this is a discussion we'll have to have from the viewpoint of whether the sponsorship is a year-long sponsor, or whether we end up with individual sponsors, which is maybe the way to go. Because I think if you do a year-long sponsorship program, you might have so many that people would get lost in it. So, I mean, that's a good point. We got to figure out how we're doing it. To be honest with you, I can't remember how we did it for the last time around, with the exception of the parade. We had separate sponsors for that because that's such a big event that we did have for that. So sponsorship is going to be one of the big discussions we have to have, and the levels in what events you get involved in.
Occasionally you see some recognition of local celebrations like this by the general court. If your group intends to contact our state rep and state senator, or perhaps even the governor's office, let us know. If you're not planning to do that, let us know. This board can certainly reach out to those representatives to see if they're interested in giving some assistance via state funding for the community celebration as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen towns that have done that, but the whole purpose of Holliston was set up so we didn't have to go that route. In the event that if you weren't going to get it, what do you do? So as I said, we got roughly 100,000 now. It didn't cost us that much for the 275th. In that 100,000 doesn't even include funding for a big project that Celebrate Holliston will be discussing over the next 6 or 8 months to have an effect by the 24th as a donation for the town as well. So we're not anticipating having to go to the legislature to seek funds unless we come up with something strange, but the 100,000 should do it. The other issue that we will talk about doing is merchandise and sales of items, and that'll return money as well. So the 100,000, I would think and hope, would be sufficient to cover everything we need to do.
So again, I'm from the school. If you don't ask, you don't get. So
Yeah.
I don't mind asking the general court.
Yeah, no question.
One other thing, Pete, I was recently driving through Walport. That community was also created and incorporated in 1724. They'll be doing a party in that year as well. So
we gotta outdo them.
well, not outdo, but when you speak to vendors and so forth, there's going to be some competition for services. So just be advised. There may be others, I'm not aware of them, but just thought I'd give you a heads up on that. Thanks, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, again, thank you very much for coming in and talking to us about this. It's exciting. My main question is, you're talking about, we're trying to come up with different events and things like that in other organizations. Are you thinking that Celebrate Holliston will plan the events with these other organizations, or sort of just?
We offer
assist them?
whatever assistance they need.
Okay,
So, if they want us, certainly to do the publicity and get volunteers and anything else that they want us to do, that's what we try to do.
okay,
But, there are a number of great events that organizations in town already do,
right.
that they do so well. We would sit back and say,
Sure.
continue what you're doing, and we're not stepping on your toes, and go ahead and do what you want to do. But from the viewpoint of having a nice calendar of events that lists everything, I think we probably should be responsible for all that.
Okay, great. I guess my other question is what do you need from us at this point? That's the only thing I'm kind of not.
I don't-
just want to do, just keep.
Other than
informed.
just, you're going to support us through this whole process,
course,
and
of course.
we'll report back to you. I don't think, we don't need any money. We don't need.
Okay.
I think years ago, we did the 275th. I think we had a store in town hall, but I don't think we're anticipating that. I suspect everything at this stage of it will online sales, and maybe we'll throw, some merchandise for display down some of the stores downtown, and let's deal with it that way.
No, this is great. It's very exciting, and I'm glad we're getting ahead of it and getting started early in this process. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the Celebrate Holliston Committee had a project that you were looking to.
We want to do a legacy project.
Yeah.
It hasn't been defined yet.
Okay, in the area of beautification of the town or?
What we will probably end up doing is just sending out to you folks and everybody else as we typically do. And we haven't been granting, we haven't been given grants in the last couple of years where we've been saving money. Of course, through COVID, last year didn't do anything, but even the couple of years before that, we were trying to save money. So we will probably, now that we have 100 and we feel pretty confident, we'll probably for our annual meeting, send out letters to police, fire and all those things, friends of the fire department, all those groups, seeing what they have for lists of things of needs.
Okay.
But also this group to see what you have as a potential capital that, you know, the whole purpose of Celebrate Holliston was to assist the town to fund things that necessarily the town didn't have the money for. So, you know, we did the gazebo down at it started park, and we got the clock at the bank and benches here and there and other things. So, you know, we'll send out a note and we'll include whatever discussion you folks think would be appropriate for things as well.
When is your annual meeting?
It's supposed to be the third Wednesday in February. Generally that, you know, kind of slides here and there depending upon what the weather is, but it's about the spring of next year.
So I hear you saying that you're going to really reach out to town departments with a kind of a request for a wish list, which sort of segues into what I was going to bring up here is, you know, a DPW wish list for beautification for the town. You know, a resident reached out to me last week to say that white picket fence along Washington Street between the police station and downtown is in a bit of disrepair. So things like that. So if you're going to contact this board, I think we would probably communicate that back to DPW to say what's on your wish list for downtown beautification or townwide beautification. And that we do that in time for your February 2020.
Well, I mean, something like that, again, if we're comfortable from the viewpoint of 100 grand being good, depending upon what we make, and again, this year's field day is the street festival, so we're not anticipating the normal revenues. But if we have some revenues from that, depending upon the price of that, that might be something we'll do well in advance of 24.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you are also here to talk about this year's event. Do you want to share the date and the time?
Yeah, I wasn't because I don't remember well, but it's September 18th. As I said, it's being downplayed a little bit, so there's no parade to get involved in that. But it is a street festival closing off thanks to the police department and the fire department as well. They can't get to their fire station. But it'll be down Central Street with vendors down there, making use of glassware to some extent as well. The hours are normal hours from 10 to 3 on Saturday, the 18th.
It was brought to my attention at the farmer's market on Sunday, Travis, that weekend, September 18th, 19th, the farmer's market organizers would like to move the market to Saturday.
I will put them in touch with our, you know, layout people to see how to accommodate all that, although again, I haven't been to all of our meetings. There is concern on our group of too much of a crowd in COVID. So we'd have to chat about that as to whether that creates too much of a mass of people. We wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it. It's got to be a layout thing. I mean, I'm in charge of facilities. They can't give me a layout plan for like 2 more weeks. I'm already telling the dumpster people and the portable toilets and all this stuff, you gotta wait because I haven't seen the layout yet.
So we shouldn't
But I'll make that note
and
we'll get, who's the, Bobby, right? We'll get a hold of Bobby.
We shouldn't entertain a permit change, a request for a permit change then until we hear back from Celebrate Holliston.
We'll have to coordinate.
Okay. And then the last thing, this is really for you, Travis. It came to the graphic designer who helped with some of the governance committee presentation at town meeting mentioned that she did not have access as a graphic designer to a physical town seal. And I'm wondering for promotional materials, if what we have is sufficient for whomever you might put out for marketing services in today's digital world, if without a physical town seal that works for high quality graphics and marketing materials. So the question is, do we have a physical town seal?
It's in 2 iterations, JPEG of the town seal.
No,
If you're talking about physical town seal would be through the.
I don't think I've ever seen one.
What we'd have is through the town
Yeah, I mean,
clerk's
you get
office, right? So we have a JPEG of that. And then we have the very old version, which is black and white. But a physical seal would be at the town clerk's office. so
Okay,
I'll
I'll
get that.
check. Yeah, okay, all right. That's all I had. Thank you for the
Okay,
presentation.
well, thank
Very
you. Have a
exciting.
good evening.
Thank you.
All right, so that's all set there. We're gonna move on to an update from the Traffic Advisory Committee, for which we have the Chair of the Traffic Advisory, Chief Stone, to join us. Thank you. Come on up to the table.
This is a follow-up on the Celebrate Holliston. I have issued permit on my desk, so I told Travis I'll be ready for this. We've already set with the fire chief. The organizers and gone through it all, we just have a permit.
Great. So you are here to present the TAC report that was approved by the committee last week and
Yes.
a request for signs.
Yes, we, everybody get a copy of the report
Yes.
from TAC. So that was just a summary of some of the petitioners we've heard. We've heard a number of resident petitions regarding traffic requests and changes and modifications and so forth. Fortunately, through some of our efforts, we were able to combine a lot of those. So for example, South Street, we had several individual petitions that we were able to hear one petition at one hearing. Same thing with Bullard Street. We do have a number of petitions still on our list to be heard, and that number keeps increasing. So originally, we had discussed in December of 2019, when we first formed, was to meet quarterly every year and to provide a quarterly report to the select board. We've met probably every other month, sometimes every month. Most of it being through Zoom because of COVID, but we are certainly meeting more than originally anticipated. We recently just discussed at our last meeting about how to create a subcommittee or a working group. And through conversation with the town clerk, it sounds like that's not going to be an option that we thought we might have had. And the idea behind that was to try to move through the list of petitions a little bit faster, because when we're at the full hearing, it does take, it's a 9-member committee. It does take a good amount of time to hear just one petition. You want to give it its due diligence. So we're currently kind of back at the drawing board on how to do that and how to work through some of those. But the list kind of summarizes a number of accomplishments or items that we were able to do over the last couple of years. I don't know if you want me to go through them or if they had any questions on the ones that were presented. I think some of the ones that were highlighted, TAC made a recommendation to the select board to adopt chapter 9017C. That was a townwide acceptance, and that was a product of what TAC was able to do. And like I said, we've made several recommendations, whether it be on individual streets, neighborhoods, and so forth. We've worked with Safe Routes to School, and we've been able to address some school safety concerns. Specifically, we had a request for 4 LED stop signs at the intersection of Church and Railroad. As everybody here knows, it's a busy intersection, especially when school is back in session. So those are approved, and those are in the process of being ordered and installed. In addition to a new flashing beacon on the crosswalk of Woodland Street. That was another accomplishment, I think, of TAC. As I said, we're currently going through our list of petitioners. We're undergoing a traffic sign audit as we speak that will be due by the end of August. DPW Director Sean Reese is working on that to replace, repair, and kind of reset some of the signs throughout town and take an inventory of what we have and what we might need. And the goal behind that is to have that report done by the end of summer in time for the fall town meeting warrant to open. And if there is a funding source that may be needed to make that recommendation to the select board while that warrant is still open.
Travis provided a little bit of an update before the meeting started. The special town meeting 2020 article that appropriated money for the purchase of signs has a balance of 9,000. So I don't know that it will cover everything identified within the sign audit, but we
Sure.
do have an outstanding balance. So
Okay.
that's something to be considered
We'll
if
get
there's a
that.
request for another article.
So I'm happy to answer any questions, or if anybody go to dive deeper into any of the traffic advisory.
John and Ben, and
I'm all set. Great job. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good.
I do have a couple questions, and one comment, this report, this is great. I appreciate you, TAC coming up with this report. This is very helpful to see sort of like what's going on and things like that. That was something that I've requested in the past, so I wanted to say thank you for putting it together. As I read through this report, it looks like we're just looking at things that have basically been heard. Is that correct?
Correct.
This isn't the queue that's still outstanding, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, they'd have to bring a whole notebook.
Right,
There's a
So
lot.
we have quite a few petitions, yeah, and
2 more this week.
two more today, this morning.
Okay.
You know, that are coming in and they're, you know, part of our discussion is how to give an initial reaction from TAC, say, hey, we received your request, please give us some time. Obviously, COVID has really slowed us down. We're starting to pick that back up. But we were hoping that working group or subcommittee could really come to fruition. We had 3 members of TAC that were willing to do it, as a member of the police department, a traffic safety officer, and really kind of go through that list and see what can we just knock off right away and make some recommendations. Unfortunately, it sounds like we can't, because of the open meeting law, have that group without having a separate agenda and posting. It's redundant at that point. So we're really kind of looking at, because everybody, you know, obviously it's a volunteer committee, but it's we get 9 people together. We had to cancel our meeting in June because we couldn't get a quorum, and it's just we're trying to work through it. So
And there's probably a better process out there too that we're working to find. I'd say.
yeah, and you know, I've been in contact with other chiefs that either chair or on traffic advisory committees or groups. So I'm going to reach out to them and say, you know, when you have that backlog, how do you clear that?
Okay.
So
And are you finding that we're getting more requests now that as people understand that it's out there, less? Or is it kind of in the same steady? Just
it's been pretty steady. It's been
Okay.
pretty consistent and pretty steady throughout.
okay. Does it make sense? I mean, you know, we talked about like, you know, money from special town meeting. Does it make sense to continue to have special, and this is a question for everybody, not necessarily just the chief, but does it make sense to have that as like a warrant article, or should this be something that maybe we think about, you know, putting in a budget line, or is that, am I just kind of out of bounds there?
That discussion came up at our earlier meetings as to how to approach this. If I recall correctly, the general consensus from those who are department chairs, so you have Chief Stone, Chief Cassidy, Sean Reese, is that they don't want it in their budget because it complicates, no, not complicates, but it adds a layer to their budget prep process. It's also unpredictable too. I don't think there's an anticipation that every town meeting there's going to be a request.
Okay.
It comes from the work of the committee, and so until you have those petitions before you and it becomes clear, like when you look on the spending action items, we have
Right.
several that are referenced back to that town meeting, 2020 town meeting article that funded the traffic studies. That request was generated out of petitions heard by the committee.
Okay.
So it's, I think, more responsive to do it in that way
So
than to
you're-
put it into the budget of a department that may or may not have.
It's a little
need
more
for it.
reactive than saying like we think that there might be some other requests that are out there. I mean, and that's fine. That's just the way we set it up.
Just based on our conversation through this last budget cycle, right? So for signs specifically, the DPW has a line for the maintenance of signs, right? For worn signs, broken signs, to replace them. And the question was always, right, is it appropriate for TAC to be, you know, to commandeer that line and use that for the purpose of signs for TAC? And the answer, you know, I think that we all kind of discussed was no, right? They have a specific purpose for their sign budget. The request for signs as was put forward to town meeting was specifically to give TAC. So in the question of should it be a budget, I think it would be a budget, but it would probably be something separate, right? It's something to consider, but it would be separate from the fire department, which sits on TAC, the police department, which sits on TAC, the DPW, that sits on TAC. And so if it makes more sense to do that because we're seeing it consistently over time, I think that's something we can talk about, but that would be the idea, is that none of these requests are from the police chief, they're from TAC. And therefore the warrant articles to date has been a more appropriate vehicle.
And if I could just jump in, so we are in the middle of a sign audit.
Yes.
And perhaps that's something, we haven't discussed this yet, but you know, to spitball here for a minute, perhaps that's something that goes under the DPW FY23, even FY24 budget as an increase to that line item, since those would be replacements and repairs as opposed to new, which is what TAC has really been addressing.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So
Sure.
if once we complete the sign audit and identify the cost matched to the approved work,
Yeah.
perhaps then that particular task falling from TAC goes into the DPW to be discussed, but perhaps
Maybe.
that's the better way to do that.
Is that, and that actually leads me to my next question, which is about that audit, is the audit looking at potentially removing or moving signs too? Is that part of the process, not just inventorying what's out there? So say there's a 35-mile-an-hour sign in a place that maybe it's not right, and then it gets moved to another spot where it could be a better option.
Yeah, so we have currently the 9 members of TAC have access to a Google Sheet.
Okay.
And as they either hear from a petitioner or hear from themselves or observe something in town, and we live all throughout town, so we're gonna hit all the areas, is to add it to that spreadsheet by street. So if I'm driving down Maple Street, I know the stop sign on Maple Street is faded, I'm gonna add that to the inventory. Sean's then gonna get that list and compile that. That's a working list, so if Ms. Hine puts Maple Street on the stop sign, I'm not gonna put it on there again because I'll see when I go to enter it. In addition to TAC, I actually advise all 25 of my officers while I'm on patrol, and we hit probably every street, every night on every shift, to add to that list as well, because it's another set of eyes, another set of, another viewpoint where they may see a safety issue where maybe a TAC member wouldn't see that. So I think between TAC and all the members of the department, I think we should cover a good majority, and to my knowledge, it's never been done before, so I think it's a good opportunity to kind of see what we have and then reset and
See if it makes sense to keep the sign
Yeah,
there.
we could
Like
be able
we
to-
might have too many signs in a spot or something that just doesn't. it
Right.
becomes confusing.
And this 9,000 could cover it. We don't, if we're only gonna replace 20 signs, I would imagine it's gonna be more than that, but, yeah, I think we're in a good spot to start.
And when is that, do we have an anticipate, I mean, I understand this is like a work in progress, but are we kind of like looking to try to get it done by?
Sean had a September 15th-ish date, and we'll meet September 1st, so my guess would be October, November. This would not be, at this point in time, I don't think this is a
We won't.
special town meeting
Yeah, I
or an
have,
October town meeting warrant article, but I could be off on that.
I think we could be ready. Yeah,
Oh,
I think
okay.
we could, yeah.
Okay, take that back.
I have, my officers have the list due on August 25th, so they have 4 weeks to do it. And they're gonna add,
Dates
they're
mixed up.
gonna add to that list, and we're gonna meet before our, I think the town meeting warrant
Closes, yeah.
closes
September
20th.
20th.
so we're meeting in the beginning of September in plenty of time.
That's right, I remember that now, thank you. So I don't have any questions or comments, I sit on TAC, and so I'm very familiar with the work being done by the TAC. What will happen is if this board, and I think we do, decide to accept the report, it'll be posted to the TAC page on the town website, and then residents can see the work of the TAC as well. So unless there's any additional comment from John or Ben, I'm going to accept the report of the Traffic Advisory Committee. Thank you. And then there's a second piece to this, which is the request for signage from our last TAC meeting for the 2 dangerous curve signs on Hill Street.
Yes, I
Because
think
there's-
those ones to Horton though. Did he prepare those and send them, do you know?
I don't have it.
I had asked Drew.
Okay. So we have to wait, okay.
Yes, I don't have those with me today.
You
I
don't-
can
I
do them
don't-
next week though.
I don't think he needs to be here to present them, though. We can just bring it up as an agenda item and
I think he usually does it in like a memo or minutes.
I'll follow.
no problem. Okay. I think we're all set. There are no questions from the audience, so we're gonna let you go and move on. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
All right,
Did you
so
want a motion to accept the report, or were you just hope that, or is the board all set?
I am following precedent. When the stipend committee presented their report, we accepted it and moved on. We did not take a vote, but we certainly can if you think that's more appropriate.
As long as the board's comfortable, we'll post it to the website.
Thank you. All right, good night.
Thank you. They don't go too far.
You think?
One more thing to want to try.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the CARES Act ARPA programmatic update.
Was the babysitter get time and a half? You're not there by 8. Just a couple minutes, Matt.
Evening, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So this is gonna sort of be a tag team with myself and the town administrator, just to sort of give an update. As most folks know, today was the deadline for the first round of ARPA funding. So do you have a presentation or an overview that you wanted to share, or
Yeah,
you gonna do that later?
Let me just, very high level, the ARPA steering group will have its first meeting available to the public next Monday, 12 PM. We'll record that and then put it up on the website. It's obviously not for open meeting law, it's just more for transparency, so people can see the process as the requests are reviewed by the group. So August 9th is a Monday, 12 PM, and then we'll put that video up on the website. If anybody wants to see some excellent video, the chief and I shot one, and is also on the ARPA webpage. If you have any questions on how to put in an ARPA request as a board committee organization. And so I can go through a couple of requests that we'll talk about tonight, but if you have any high level.
No, just in terms of, what brought us to ARPA, which is the pandemic, and just a reminder, we are in a county that is designated by public health metrics as a county with significant spread of virus occurring right now. CDC came out with new guidance last week, DPH came out with an advisory, DESE and DPH are still figuring out what their recommendations are for schools this fall, but I will remind the board that 2 months ago, when the mask order was lifted on May 29th, I said, don't burn them, hold on to them. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you what's going to happen in the immediate future. You're likely going to find more businesses or establishments requesting that if you wish to patronize them, that you wear a mask. So we're continuing to monitor. We're watching the data very closely. I did share earlier with the chair prior to the meeting that our numbers in town doubled today. We went from 5 active cases to 10 active cases. So we continue to monitor. Just urge people, if they have been hesitant in the past and they haven't yet availed themselves of the vaccination process, it's free, it's very accessible to get tested if you think you have symptoms, and to take all the mitigation steps that we've been talking about for a long time.
If I can jump ahead for just a minute, do you have information on those 10, whether or not they're vaccinated? If you do, will you be sharing that on a regular basis?
I do not have any concrete information. I still get very disaggregated data from the department, the health department, giving me high level data from Maven. So there is a tab, I believe, on the Maven database, which may give information as to whether or not the individual is vaccinated. We have read-only access, so I'm not sure if they can drill down into the data. So anything I had would likely be anecdotal, which would be hard for it to be actionable at that point.
Okay.
But again, the public health, prior to the Provincetown situation, the number was 0.15% of vaccinated individuals were contributing to the positive cases, which means 3 out of every 2,000 people that were coming down with a positive diagnosis had been fully vaccinated. So it's still a small case.
Okay, thank you. All right, so for CARES, John, do you have any questions or comments?
I just have one question, Chief, relative to the COVID numbers you were just giving us. The town was kind of in a fully mobilized telework capacity, and I think we were in a good place during the COVID. Do we have any emergency? Do we have any sense that if we had to reactivate to that model that we come up short? We have the resources in place to go remote again. So anything we should be aware of if that need happens, like in a day, because sometimes these things happen quickly, and I just want to make sure we're prepared for that possibility of getting a switch.
Excellent question. We are absolutely prepared to be able to change our work mode, thanks to our technology director and the great infrastructure that he built last year very quickly. We have the capacity to transition an individual department or an individual employee very quickly. So I'm confident that if local conditions, and again, just because the county is determined to be in an area of significant spread, if you look at the numbers in our area of the county, because remember, we're the largest county in the Commonwealth, I'm very comfortable with it. Where the numbers are insured like Holliston. We're really good in terms of our number who are vaccinated. But if we need to, based on other situations that we don't have control over, I'm confident that we as a workforce would be able to modify it.
Thanks, Mike. That was a good team.
Okay, thank you. Ben?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay, and you will, you've been great, obviously weekly, you're here updating the board. There's nothing that you're saying in the information and data that you're sharing that indicates we're looking at a return to a local state of emergency, or that you're looking to advise the Board of Health on a mask mandate. We're not there yet, you're not anticipating that at this point in time.
I do not see the justification for either of those actions. If the Department of Public Health issues a stronger advisory, and it's incumbent on the local Board of Health to implement that or to make more stringent guidelines locally, I obviously will support them.
Okay.
And assist with messaging through all of our different platforms. But right now, I don't see a justification for asking the board for a new state of emergency.
Chief, you have 19 months of near 24/7 supervision over this pandemic. Our trust in you is incredibly high. So thank you for giving your opinion on that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then we're going to move on unless there are any questions from the audience.
Just gonna get into some of the ARPA
Yep, right.
items so that we're prepared.
Yep, I was going to move on to ARPA.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I had just a question.
Sure, if you just want to come up and say your name and, or say, you can say that in public comment. He's not going anywhere.
No, oh, okay.
None of us are going anywhere. All right, we're going to move on to ARPA.
Okay, so for ARPA, I was gonna pull up two things. One is the requests that are going into the ARPA steering group from department heads who report to the select board. And then the other item is a prioritization list to get ready for the ARPA steering group, but for some other things when it relates to potential capital projects that are quote unquote shovel ready, whether it be the water department, highway department, or other. So just very high level, and please, if you have put in a request to the ARPA steering group and you don't see your request on here, understand that I have specifically called out the ones that report to the select board. So you'll see the name on the left is the department head, so James Keast, myself, or Chief Cassidy. And these are all items. And so one thing I just want to talk high level this evening, obviously, the ARPA steering group is making a recommendation to the select board as the executive board that is making the decisions under ARPA. So what we could do is certainly take a vote for you to approve this to go to the ARPA steering group to come back to you. I don't think that's necessary, but certainly if there was anything on this list you absolutely wanted pulled, we could do that this evening. So, you know, it didn't have to tomorrow after the deadline today, all of these will be going to the ARPA steering group. So just for some, you know, just to understand, this is the information that gets compiled in the list. I've hidden a few columns because we do allow for quite a bit of narrative to be allowed, but this is a category that must be selected, which is one of the criteria under ARPA has to be checked at least one box. And then if it's a capital project, there's further information that can be pulled. So for James Keast, there was one request under the wastewater treatment plant. That will come up again also under sort of economic development for the downtown area. But his request is specific to the facility itself and planning ahead, which is under ARPA. I have two requests in here. One is related to the budget conversation we had on fire EMS organizational study. One update I would have on that is that we have joined some communities in the area to allow E911 to do a study for us and pay for it through the Collins Center on dispatch specifically, but this is looking at the organizational structure of fire and EMS in town. And this was the cost that we got. If we didn't want to go through this with ARPA, it would most likely, based on our previous discussion, be a warrant article. And the other one down here under myself is the town was approached by a program called Viewpoint with Dennis Quaid, which is an economic development, essentially a spot that would be done on the town and broadcast rather widely nationally is a nice place to live, work type program, and that there is a cost to that. So from the economic development standpoint, I was put this in here. The rest are from Chief Cassidy as is in his role as emergency manager, management director. So obviously you could answer any questions here, but I think they are in some extent sort of understanding that there will be needs specific to COVID as we related to CARES that are also eligible for ARPA. And so to make sure that those are on the radar of the ARPA steering group so that they don't get lost in translation or lost from the big picture. So this is just kind of a summary here. Obviously, I can answer any questions on the specifics of it, but also just to kind of show where we are at the moment. And I can pull up capital if there's no question on this.
Okay, so I'll entertain questions, John.
Travis, one question I have on that tracking sheet, would it make sense to show the available funds for a given snapshot of proposed ideas? So for example, right now you're looking at this list, which totals $1.059 million. We don't have $1 million right now in the bank to fulfill all of those requests. We will get there, right, when the various tranches come in. But would it make sense to lay out what our expected cash flow of ARPA is over the next 3 years and how we're drawing against it? Is this something similar you did with
Sure. So for what we're looking at right now, this is actually a very, this is a short version of what we've received to date. So this is just the ones, right? So the Youth and Family Services, the library, all those ones that are taking votes are not on here at the moment. So, but what I can do once the whole list is put together is add the revenue component, absolutely. For perspective.
And these are the unfiltered ones, right? There hasn't been any determination by the ARPA group, steering group to really start pulling off items that are just not here. They should be over here kind of thing.
Nope. So right now we're through today, the phase of information coming into this sheet. I'm just showing you the ones that are sort of within, under the facilities manager, myself, or the emergency management director. Once the document's complete after tonight, I'll send it out unfiltered to the group to begin.
So we expect some boards and committees to be taking vote on their items in the next week or so, correct?
They've mostly been coming in. This is, again, just a snapshot of a much larger list that has come in through today. So the list is filled up through today. And there's the library, schools took a vote, Youth and Family Services, parks, rail trail. There's been quite a bit filling up the request form. Private entity as well.
Great, I'm all set, thank you.
Ben?
I don't have any questions about this at this on the capital. So thank you.
Okay, I just have one, the cleaning and sanitizing at 500,000.
It's over the course of multiple years.
I was gonna say, because we did not spend that on the CARES Act. Okay. And
So what the form allows you to do, it requires you to do is estimate your costs over 5 years, but then also specifically call out what is coming up in the current fiscal year, FY '22. So what Chief put was 100,000 for FY '22 and 500,000 for 5 years.
okay, and the traffic monitoring equipment, Chief, that is something we've seen before. It's now coming through CARES, through ARPA, excuse me.
Throwing it against the wall.
Yeah, no, I was just making sure that this was, it looked very familiar.
It's not
and-
a new request.
Got it, understood. All right, so Travis, you are looking for board consensus that these are appropriate requests from through the select board to the ARPA steering group.
Yeah, if there's anything here that you feel is inappropriate, and then also just a consensus that you don't want to be voting to send something to ARPA for ARPA to send to you, I think is, as long as everybody's on that page, I think we're good.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. John, Ben, do you have any concerns about us by consensus?
I have no concerns, just one item, the technology pieces we talked about that were coming off CARES that we thought might have to go into ARPA. This is the technology support that we've been doing for Zoom. Where would that be grabbed?
So right now, we have the part-time staff for IT in the FY '22 budget. And so there's nothing specific to this. These boards that are now, 5 of them are owned in different facilities, were all paid for through CARES. I can confirm with Chris Mayo this evening to make sure that there's nothing that we feel is not, needs to be on here. So broadband, I think, was the biggest one under ARPA that we looked at and did not feel that there's anything specifically applicable to Holliston. The way that it was written is really for getting broadband to rural communities that don't have access. When it comes to actual IT support, I don't have anything in the moment on the queue.
And you stated before that the other prong, which I think was revenue loss, is not in play for us.
I think the way that they've written it is that it's so broad, you have to essentially add up all your revenue. If we were to make the case that when you add in our revolving funds, especially some of the larger ones in the school, the parks, that even though sort of some revenue areas like the building department, which have been humming along and carrying other, sort of declining areas, that if we put the whole pie together, we may be able to make the case that there was some revenue loss and funnel that to the revolving funds whose balance took a hit. That's really, they made it so specific that I think that that's the only thing we could reasonably come up with.
And again, this is just for this first round of requesting proposals. So we can continue to see if guidance changes or modifies, or other communities across the country had really good luck doing the calculations for revenue loss and came up with this great template that other communities might be able to apply, and look at that down the line. So we know, just because there wasn't a project request for the revenue loss by August 2nd, doesn't mean that we've completely written that off between now and 2024.
Travis, in the course of discussing some of these big picture options, revenue loss, broadband, we early on talked about, well, we do put a mile of water pipe in the ground every year and we pay for it out of our fees. Is that idea in the scope of a potential ARPA request, and what year would you pulse that?
So I asked, obviously we have two studies coming in right now from Stantec. One is the water modernization study, so that may impact this, but we did ask Ollie Parand from AP Associates to give us what are the shovel-ready projects, which is one of the components that we looked at for ARPA. And that's what this is here. So this is, first what he did was give us projects in each category, which is water, highway, dams. What he did upon a further request, which was from, so not only is ARPA one component that we can look at capital now, but also there's a very large infrastructure bill that most likely won't come directly to us, but will go through the state. And so we would work with Rep. Dykema and Senator Spilka on. So we also want to be prepared to give them some items should we be able to get some capital funding for those types of things. So we asked him to prioritize it, which is what this is. So it's another thing that I would send to the ARPA steering group, because there are projects that are within that scope and scale of ARPA. There are some projects on here that are outside of the total amount that we expect for ARPA, and those would be ones where I would probably highlight from the state through this federal program. But this is his itemized list with, prioritized list with water and highway sort of commingled.
Can I jump on that for a minute? There are actually three potential funding sources for a list like this. One is the town's ARPA funds. Two is the state's ARPA funds. They have 5 billion.
They've also reached out to us.
Right, so this list being sent to Representative Dykema and Senator Spilka's office can be used for both, to tap into potentially both of those funding sources. One is actual, the 5 billion the state is getting from ARPA, and the other is potential, is if this infrastructure bill is approved. So this list serves two purposes at the state level, to give us access potentially to both sources of funding. Is that how you're
I think what
viewing
we
it?
need to have is shovel-ready projects should funding sources become available.
Okay.
Is how I'm approaching it.
Yeah.
I think that, the water modernization study that we expect to be coming in the next few weeks may impact this in terms of the prioritization list, but as of today, where Ali sits, and obviously the request. And so the prioritization comes from the board. We asked him to take a crack at this. That's why I wanted to make sure that you were comfortable with what he's put together here before I forward it to anybody, Rep. Dykema, Senator Spilka, or the ARPA steering group.
So the communication with the legislators has been for the $5 billion ARPA and the infrastructure bill? I thought it was just the latter.
We were reached out to essentially saying, you should be prepared to give us a prioritization list, because the state is going to have funding and they don't know exactly what that's going to look like. So be prepared was essentially the message that we received.
And that message came through maybe a month ago, before the infrastructure bill had moved along as successfully as it has.
No, I think again, at this point, the best thing for us to do is be prepared to have options in multiple price ranges. I think having, if we don't have things that are shovel ready, then the answer may be what we need to do. And ARPA does allow this, right? So if what we don't have is the next mile of water main pipe design, then it might be that we want to immediately kickstart that by, approving a design engineer of the next thing that comes from the water modernization study, so that we're ready at the next town meeting, for example, when that fund is ready to do the next mile.
The starting point for ARPA was what, March 10th?
April.
April,
Was it?
this year, 2021. For anything that point on would be in play, designed forward, right?
Yes.
Okay.
On this priority list, you've got them listed, the top three there, Norfolk Street water main replacement on there.
Yes, he's got 3A, 3B as in terms of a large overall project.
So in terms of complete streets report and the draft sidewalk study report that we've seen, the Norfolk Street makes a lot of sense being in the top three. The only other piece then would be, well, not the only, but another significant piece would be the Stantec water main replacement study coming back. If that also tags Norfolk Street, I would argue it goes to the top of the list, but that's just my 2 cents there on the top three priorities that you have listed there.
Can I chime in for one quick
Please.
thing about this? So one thing that personally that I feel about this whole process is that I think, we're not talking enough about the dams at the bottom.
We will later, right?
We will later. But I believe that, as I look at this list, I think it's great seeing some of these shovel-ready projects, but my concern about the dams is we don't have a dedicated funding source at this time, the way we do with some of the other things. Like we do get money from the state for highway, for road repair. We do have an infrastructure fee for the water mains. And I'm not saying that those aren't important and they might not be, jumping ahead, but my concern about the dams is that we don't have that funding. So personally, I believe that, an opportunity like ARPA to try to at least put us in an advantageous financial position with our dams is important. Because they're a risk and we want to make sure that they're shored up and in good shape for years to come. So that's my personal belief about this, and that I'd like to see particularly like to try to get some numbers applied to the dams just so we can have an understanding of what that looks like, and if it makes sense to try to move them into something like ARPA, what could be an opportunity to take care of some potential risk for the community. That's what I feel about.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, but yeah.
Thank you. So we're still waiting to hear from the federal government as to whether or not we're approved for the BRIC funding that we were passed through the state onto the federal review. If that's the case, then we're going to be able to use an outside vendor to update our hazard mitigation plan, which is required to be updated every 5 years to be approved by FEMA. Once we have an updated and approved FEMA hazard mitigation plan, that then makes us eligible for a couple other mitigation funding programs through both the state as well as the federal government, which do address the dam issue that you identified. So we've got a lot of
I think
we're a dog chasing our tail.
Yeah, and I get that. I think I'm looking for a long-term strategy here, and it might be, maybe we just kind of like we're doing with sanitation and cleaning, is we might say, we're going to dedicate X number of dollars for dams, and then year 2 or 3, if these grants don't come through, we have some alternative processes that we can manage these.
Also, the MVP program is out there for the town to consider.
That's that's great to hear.
And seawalls and dams as an updated one. So I'll have a
It's a
little
good
bit of
point that
a
you raised.
update on dams coming up.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, so what I hear, Travis, to be clear, we are advancing those projects to the ARPA steering group. The board has not taken a vote. The only vote that the board would take is when it come back, after the steering group has had a chance to vet them and make a recommendation to this board. So there's just a consensus agreement that they're appropriate to be put into the funnel.
And the recommendation might not necessarily be for funding from the board at this time. It might be to park them or to continue to pursue other funding sources.
We're demonstrating we're a flexible board and open to feedback.
Absolutely.
All right, I think we're all set then on the ARPA update and the CARES update. If there are any questions from the audience here or on Zoom, give you a quick minute to raise your hand.
August 9th, noon, we will be doing a publicly available meeting And then post that on the website, and James Keith says the same.
Okay, so James Keast, our facilities manager, has a question or comment. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, this is James Keast, 104 Fairview Street in Holliston. Actually, not having my facility manager hat on now, resident hat on. Cassidy, regarding the breakthrough cases, is there any indication on the severity of the symptoms for folks? Are they, if you're vaccinated and you do get, COVID, are the symptoms more mild, or is there any information that you have on that?
Absolutely. The evidence demonstrates the efficacy of the vaccines, and the majority of the breakthrough cases, individuals who get a positive test, even though they are fully vaccinated, their symptoms are milder and they do not normally require hospitalization, and definitely are not getting to the level where they would need to be on a ventilator unless there was some other significant underlying medical condition or comorbidity. But for the super majority of the breakthrough cases, their symptoms are milder and are not requiring hospitalization.
Great, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, so thank you very much, Chief. And we're gonna move on then to warrants. John, I believe we have a warrant for tonight.
We have a warrant totaling $1,125,685.19.
I will second that motion.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. That carries. All right, we're gonna move on to public comment. We'll go first to the board and then to the public. John?
Just have one, I'd like to recognize some training that Chief Stone has identified for members of his staff associated with the upcoming post implementation police training and standards. Chief, if you give us 2 seconds to explain what that training is, because I think it's a meaningful follow-up to some of the things we talked about in the spring. I'm sorry to hold you an extra 30 minutes, but I think this is an important thing for us. Maybe updated on, thanks.
Maybe should take the test a lot.
Yeah, I like it.
Sounds like an ARPA request.
No, it's good. This is just a proactive, I go to a lot of meetings with chiefs, and this is a active and current dialogue with police reform, and it's one of the items I think we can be proactive with and take that step forward. So I reached out to Chief Kais. He's the president of Mass Major Chiefs and also the chief of Chelsea. He's an attorney, and he was on the legislative team to actually help draft the police reform language. So not only is he familiar with it, but he helped draft it. He's knows it in and out. He's considered an expert in it. So reached out to him Friday. Got right back to me, said he's going to come down to HPD, teach a class just for us. The class is going to be with my 5 first-line supervisors, my 2 lieutenants, myself. So that's 8. But to make it worthwhile, we invited Hopkinton PD as well. They also have 8 members of their command staff. So it'll be a group of 16. It's a smaller group, but it'll allow for dialogue and Q&A and stuff like that. If there's anybody to ask questions about police reform, it's Chief Guy. So not only was he responsive, but we put together a pretty good program.
Thanks, Chief. The other thing I just wanted him to speak to very briefly was the update that was covered in Holliston report on the diversion program.
Yeah, so we recently restructured that program through the Department of Mental Health, and it was a program that had 4 communities: Holliston, Hopkinton, Ashland, and Sherburne. We've reorganized, so it's now us, Hopkinton, and Sherburne. Ashland is no longer participating. It's the same fee for us. We've had it for, it's got to be 7 or 8 years now in our department. It costs the town of Holliston $5,000 every year. Department of Mental Health picks up the entire rest of it and pays Ashley our clinician salary. So for that $5,000 investment, she's probably the busiest person on our department. So with the price staying the same with that $5,000 contribution, we are now getting Ashley more time. Instead of splitting it 25% of the time, she'll be with us 33% of the time. So it's a good benefit for us, and we value Ashley and what she brings to us tremendously.
Thanks, Chief.
Ben, can I jump the line and give my public comment now because the chief is at the table?
Go nuts.
All right, thank you, sir. I wanted to thank you for looping in Officer Grace from the traffic safety unit, and encouraging him, if his schedule allows, to attend the speed mitigation forum. I think that that will be of some value, hopefully a lot of value, to have a HPD officer there. So thank you for facilitating that. And then I wanted to just give you an update. Jackie Weiner, this was my public comment. Jackie Weiner was on a Massachusetts Municipal Association call this past week, and she presented on how Holliston addressed CARES funding through Youth and Family Services. She talked about the rent and mortgage relief program that we offered. She had a big audience for this. She also then went on to talk about what she will most likely be requesting through ARPA. And I don't want to jump the gun. I don't know what she's put in the funnel for a request, but she did talk significantly about hiring a non-benefited mental health support clinician, and then also talked about expanding interface services and primary prevention programs and therapy groups, which just seems like a really wonderful, strong, important complement to what you're talking about, the jail diversion program. I know you guys talk a lot, but these two seem to be very positive efforts to move forward in terms of addressing mental health in our community. So
Yeah.
I'm sure you're aware of that, but I wanted to bring it
I
up.
think you certainly my monthly reports and mental health calls, especially during COVID, but even regardless of COVID, we've seen a tremendous increase in that. So I joke that Ashley's the busiest person, but she really does a tremendous amount of follow-up. And it's a question that's always been asked whether we want to take Ashley on as a member of our department. And it's unequivocally no, because it's set up exactly the way it should be. Advocates provides all our training, all just certifications. We're not mental health clinicians. We only have limited training in that. So she receives all that. It's a huge benefit to us in the partnership that we have with advocates. So.
And you put the dollar amount that you anticipated her having saved, this program having saved the town of Holliston, quite a high. It was well over the 5,000 we're putting in. Let's just put it
Yeah,
that
they
way.
do the monthly report.
Yeah.
Advocates does for us and what it would cost in terms of prosecution
Yeah.
and getting resources from the ambulance to send people to the hospital rather than to the CJ system. So.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you.
I think we're all set.
Okay.
Great work. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Ben, public comment? Okay. That wasn't- You could have just said that.
What's the fun in that?
You were very gracious in letting me go ahead of you.
I'm good, thank you.
All right, so then we're going to turn to those in the room and those on the Zoom call for public comments. Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you come on up, pull up a chair. How are you?
You're welcome. Thank you. So it's Beth Hopper, 184 Winthrop Street in Holliston. This kind of segues well, talking about the water main project.
Okay.
And so there seems to be some confusion in town as to what a water main is and what a service line is.
Okay.
So I think it's important, I mean, it's a multi-million-dollar project. Sorry. This will take a second, because it's pretty straightforward. So in this instance, you see this pipe running down here. It's the water main. And then this pipe's coming from the water main to the house. That's a service line. That's why it's called service. It's going to the house. And then there's just another diagram under it that shows the same thing. That large pipe running parallel down the street is the water main. So this is a town diagram.
Hard to read that.
Well, that'll help. Okay, so this is Arch Street and this is Winthrop Street. And my house sits right here, opposite Arch Street. So this straight line running down here on the road is equivalent to what we saw here, running down the road. It's a water main. There are no service lines showing on this diagram from the town. It's just showing the water main. So you can see down toward the dead end, which is here, the lake is here. It says it's a 2-inch main. And this rest is a 6-inch main.
Okay.
So my house is basically, I'm guessing, right where like this gate is, circle. So I also talked to Kevin Riley, who's a federal EPA person. And he said I could use his name, I have his phone number.
Okay.
And he said that is without a doubt a water main. And yet, people who are overseeing the water main project have been telling me it's a service line. So Massachusetts recommends that no water main be smaller than 3 inches. No, oh, I forgot, I brought show and tell. I'm embarrassing. I have a lot more things I can show you. But these are the gloves I use to wash my dishes. This goes through the whole house filter.
Mhm.
Would you be wanting to wash your teeth with that? Wash your hair. Cook your food. 20 years. And then it's like a twilight zone because something that was originally called a water main by the town suddenly becomes a service line because it's more expedient for the town to call it a service line. And then I find people who are quite shocked when they see the photos of what I'm dealing with. And they talk to someone at town hall and town hall says, oh, it's a service line, it's no problem. It's not a service line, it's a water main. And I think at the very least, you know, I don't know why I'm living in a twilight zone. It's just, so we've identified the problem. As we've spoken before, it's a 6-inch main going down to a 2-inch. And all the debris and everything else gets caught up because the water's rushing from 6 inches to 2 inches right in front of my house. And I'm sorry, I'm only one person that's being affected, not 100. But I'm living in substandard living conditions. And the town is okay with it. You know, and that's pretty upsetting. Because I pay my taxes, I pay my water bill, I pay my water bill fee. I'm told my house is worth just as much as any other house. I don't know if you'd want your family moving into this house, if it went up for sale and somebody said to you, oh, I'm buying that house. Would you say, oh, no problem, the water's great, you know?
Beth, you've had some response from the town and you've had some response from the state.
The response from the town is that that's a service line.
What I mean to say is response in terms of coming to the house and doing some form of an assessment of the home, of the water service. to the
I
home.
have a whole house water filter that the town has graciously put in, but it's not doing enough. So
Is there
you know,
some, is there assessment, that further assessment you'd like the town, like?
I'd like the
water
town to
quality?
replace that 2-inch substandard water main. It's only 2 houses long. You're doing a water main project. I understand that this one wasn't like in your list for right now, but it needs to be done.
Your request is that your, what is called the 2-inch service line,
It's not a service
but
line.
what is called, you're saying the town is calling it a service line?
They were calling it a water main until I found that information about the 3-inch diameter. That's when they changed the terminology.
Your request is that that 2-inch line service water main is replaced with a 6-inch.
Yeah,
Okay, that is not something the board right now today here can address or answer. We can have Travis look into it. I don't know, I'm speaking from my own knowledge of the situation. I'm fairly well aware through emails and follow-up with the situation, but I can't speak to if there's additional assessment that needs to be done in terms of the water quality in the house. It's turning your gloves the dark color.
right. But you do have in the last report that I gave to the board, it says very clearly that the state of Massachusetts finds that anything below a 3-inch diameter is unacceptable for a water main.
Understood, that's, sure, that's the infrastructure. on the
So,
road.
and my concern too is that when an advocate for me contacts, and I don't know who they've been talking to, but then they get back to me and say, well, it's a service line, so there's no concern. So I'm concerned that the town who's overseeing a multi-million-dollar water main project doesn't know the difference between a water main and a service line. I think that's really quite astounding.
I'm concerned about the health your health based on the water that you're bathing in, that you're washing in, cooking with and ingesting. I'm concerned about your health. I'm concerned that if there hasn't been a water quality test, that be done
Okay.
to identify whether or not the water coming out of your tap, any tap, be tested for contaminants, for whatever it is that's turning your gloves purple. That's
Brown.
brown.
They
Sorry,
started,
turning
they
gloves turning brown.
started,
Got
they
it.
started.
That would be personally my concern, and I would feel a responsibility that we
Right,
have that
so
water tested.
I understand that, but you've seen photos of black water in my toilet tank. You've seen the sludge that comes out of my water, the thick sludge. I mean,
Are you agreeable to a water
I
quality
am, but
test?
not through the town because I don't trust the town. Because you'll just change. I mean, it needs to be done. Travis, at this point, do you agree that this is a water main, or are you still calling it a service line?
The service line went in when the houses were built down Winthrop. That the concern of 6 inches going to 2 inches is something that, as we discussed previously, I discussed with Rep. Dykema, who got looped in through the DEP and EPA conversations. Are that, we would very much like when Stantec is ready to report to the select board, that this be, clearly at the top of their list in terms of if they don't think that this is a priority, that they explain why. And we, go through the issue of
So,
6 inches to 2 inches.
Representative Dykema got back to me and said she wasn't interested because it was a 2-inch service line, so she got that information from you.
I discussed with Rep. Dykema that the Stantec report, which is due to the board in the coming
No,
month.
but
that would
she wouldn't have
address
come
the
up with the
specific-
word service line on her own. She got that from you. I mean,
We gave her the history per her request.
so this 2-inch, I want to know, this 2-inch pipe running parallel down the road that is not going to a house. Is that a
As the 6
service
inch
line?
curves from Winthrop to Arch, a 2 inch line comes off to the two houses. What was originally one house down towards the water. Then another house went in and the 2 inch was extended down beyond that. The
So-
6 inch curves from
So you're
Winthrop
saying
to
this
Arch.
2 inches they're going directly to the house, even though it's going down the middle of the road?
I have, the information is that the 6 inch goes from Winthrop to Arch
Right.
and the 2 inch line goes
The
down
6-inch
Winthrop towards the
main
water.
takes that curve, which is probably another problem. And that 2-inch pipe is not going directly, there's another line off that pipe going to the
The
houses.
2 inch line was built to go to the house and
So
the
I
house was
think-
built beyond that.
Thank you, Travis, for the input. I think we have two objective processes by which we can attempt to address the concerns we brought here tonight. We have a Stantec report coming in that it's been tagged to identify
So
the infrastructure at your location.
Oh, I appreciate that. So do
And
you
then
know when the report
we
is due?
Expect it within the, yeah.
Very soon.
When?
We've
Oh,
been talking about this for a while. We're not just,
Okay.
no lip service here, but it's been on our agenda
Okay,
for a
great.
while.
Well, I knew the report was in the works, but who knows when a report's gonna be ready, so.
Okay, and then Travis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe through the town administrator office, we can consider a third-party assessment of your
Okay.
water quality.
Okay.
That would mean someone coming into your house.
Mhm.
You'd be comfortable with that?
Yeah,
Not to beat a dead horse, but I'm looking at a map of Winthrop Street, including Beth's house, there are 4 homes from Arch Street down, so just south of you, there are 4 more homes. Are they fed off of a 2-inch line
So if you're traveling down Winthrop, there's 2 houses beyond Beth's or there.
on the left? Yep.
Yeah,
Well, I
okay,
think
so
there's
there was
3
a house that
now.
was built and the 2 inch went in, I believe it was the 70s for that house. That, I believe the same property owner then built another house down and the
Yep.
2 inch was extended beyond it. So the 2 inch, is my understanding, serves those 2 houses. We did at one point dig up in front of 184 to make sure that what we were tapped off of was the 6 inch for that house. So DPW Water Department was out there in the last couple of years to do that. So it is the 2 inch that was serving the house. And then when another house was added, it also serves that house.
okay,
That's my
the
understanding.
goes
first
all the way
house
down
is
to the
from the
lake.
1880s. The first house.
Okay, the 2 inch service line, according to our records, is put in the 70s.
So it goes all the way
Oh, I
down to the
see.
lake, right?
To the two houses beyond.
There's one
Yes,
more,
yeah.
I don't know, maybe that person has a well, there's one more around the corner.
Yeah, I see.
But
I see
the
one
house, one of the
first
houses you're
three.
looking at, that's facing Arch Street, they must be on the 6-inch.
There's a total of 4 houses there. If I see what you are, here, that's you, there's 1, 2, 3, and then you have a 4th one here. Where do they get their water from? So I'm just wondering what water line feeds those homes?
And you said that like your neighbors aren't experiencing the same, like the
No.
190, you're 184, excuse me.
That's in the choke point where it goes 6 down to
So the
2.
other ones further down aren't.
Right, I canvassed people in the area and then I
You're the only
double
one getting it.
checked with someone on the 2-inch pipe because I get on my, like if I boil water in my
Right.
pots, I get when the water turns to steam, it leaves behind the deposit. And I have like a very dark water line that can't scrub off on my water pots. And I asked her, because I didn't want to mention it if like she had, whatever. But she said, no, she has no water line on her pots, so.
So you know what's gonna happen when we go to 6 inches, right?
What?
Glow's gonna turn purple.
Yeah.
All right with that, right? All right, stay with us. Thanks for your
Okay, well,
advocacy.
thank you for listening.
No, no,
you.
stay in touch.
Have you seen the website with the pictures of the new water treatment facility?
I looked at the project update, but I haven't.
There's some photos on.
Yeah,
the
there's,
site.
we've got some photos, they're breaking ground and really working. We're working on
Okay,
it, we're trying.
thank you. I'll be in touch.
All right,
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. All right, so we're gonna move on. If
Oh,
there's-
yeah.
There's one more public comment. So Mary Greendale, I see your hand up. You just want to introduce yourself and your name and address?
Mary Greendale, 198 Highland Street. I just have one question about, are there ARPA funds for schools?
There's a third round of ESSER funding, which is what the schools received twice already for direct school-related expenses. It was not enough to cover all of their needs. They did come to the select board for a couple CARES requests. They're anticipating a third round of ESSER money, and I think it's around $500,000. I'm sorry, $435,000.
Are they able to access the ARPA funds that come through your office?
Yes. There are those 4 eligible categories, so if their requests fall, and it probably would, they're pretty broad categories, if their request fell under any one of those 4 categories, yeah, it would be considered an eligible request. Yes.
Okay, I was just confused why there was no mention of the word of schools, so thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right. Any other comments tonight? Public comment? Okay, seeing none, we're gonna move on then to a motion to open the warrant for fall town meeting, which will be October 18th, 2021. John, you have that motion to read?
I'll make a motion to move to open the warrant for the fall town meeting to be held on Monday, October 18th, 2021, with the intention to close the warrant on September 20th, 2021 at 4 p.m.
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
That carries. We're gonna move on then to a review of the survey results. So thank you to the nearly 600 people in Holliston who responded. We have your comments, your feedback, your responses here summarized. So Travis, do you want to introduce this? There's a lot of information.
Sure, so we had a previous discussion, obviously, the board wanted to solicit feedback from the community. I will say that I expected there to be feedback, but to get 600 responses on this question shows a significant level of interest. We made every effort to get it out on all platforms, but at the same point, I think just under 600 responses is significant. So there's a few different things I've provided to the board. I think, the conversation can go wherever the chair would like, but I'll just cover very high level where we are. We also allowed respondents to provide answers that, some narrative and some feedback and their own suggestions. We did offer 3 potential suggestions that had been brought to the board specifically. And then gave anybody the ability to make their own suggestion that was separate from those 3. And I can get into those if we like, but I'll pull up essentially the metrics that we have. from the 596 respondents. So this is the first chart that we show. We allowed somebody to rank each of these ideas from the least value to the greatest value to town. So purple means they really like the suggestion, blue means they really do not like the suggestion, it's not good value for the town. So we suggested the dog park, which was brought to the board. We suggested the pump track, which we heard from an individual who's brought this suggestion around. And we heard the suggestion of a rest area. So we put those three, the largest response for greatest value was the pump track, and the greatest response, or one of the greatest responses for least value was also the pump track, right? So it shows that it was in some way split. There are other, people were allowed to go anywhere from 1 to 5. So this was the first question that we asked. We asked if they were a student, just to make sure we were capturing some information on who was responding. They were mostly not students. However, about 2/3 did have school-age children. We asked if they regularly used the trail. The majority of respondents said that they did. I must have skipped over at least one here. I believe we asked if they owned a dog because of our dog park question, and it was about a split, pretty even split. We also, and you can see how Google pulled up a few things that were not within the question here, but do you support the use, the town resources? And we asked within reason. Obviously within reason means something different to everybody, but what we were not trying to say, will you support $1? It's, if the town needs to put money into operating this, put money into getting this ready, do you support that? And the overwhelming response was yes, within reason. You see a couple of people used that category to pontificate. And so that's the general information. I also provided, which I appreciate the IT director's help in pulling together, a summary of the ideas that came outside of that, which I'd be happy to sort of cover the highest, the most frequent ones if you'd like.
Yes, please.
So an ADA compliant playground / picnic area came from 26 individuals. A splash pad came from 24 individuals. A memorial community garden came from 22 individuals. A skate park, which I will mention, and I believe we had this discussion when we originally put this, a skate park is different than a pump track. A skate park was brought up by 21 individuals. A small amphitheater and rest stop was brought up by 16, rec center 16, outdoor fitness, bike rental, disc golf 16, and parking porta johns was 13. So there are some other ones on here. I won't go through that. These are the ones in the double digits. And so I think, a couple things. One, obviously, this is information that was provided through us saying, here is an open space that can be used for multiple purposes. What do you think? I think this is information that we could certainly share with the Parks Commission in general, just to say, here are some ideas that were brought to the select board through this process. Additionally, because of its proximity to Blair Square, which is going through a project, this is some information that also probably could be brought to them if there's any sort of way to incorporate any of these things as they approach 100% design. And so that is the information that we have through the survey, which closed on July 23rd.
Okay, there's some strong takeaways for me, but we'll open it up for discussion from the board and if there's public comment as well, but just jump in with what you think. I'm really struck, Travis, by the 93% who support the use of town resources. To me, that's a clear indication to move forward on this, to get to a point where we are looking at a decision down the road. I think we have clearly demonstrated support for this board to advance some future reuse. And so that's what I'm most interested to discuss tonight, is where we go next to get to that decision. I said it before, I think it's the most important thing that this board can do at this point in time is to identify what structure needs to be in place for whatever the end use is. We've talked a little bit about liability. That's obviously a question that for whatever the future reuse is going to be is going to come back to this board to answer. And I don't know how we tackle that question, except to say that any use is going to have some level of risk. And so I believe it's probably an apples to apples kind of conversation, but I think at least as a board, we should understand how do we accept that risk and mitigate? How do we address the liability? I don't think this board should make a decision on any future reuse until we've identified how we're gonna mitigate risk, how we're gonna handle the liability. Because I think ultimately that's our biggest responsibility. I think the other piece is to make sure that the infrastructure is there so that people accessing that park are doing so safely. So when you're in that area, there's not a lot of anything other than the trail going through. I think it would be reasonable to say that many people will not, whatever the future use is, many people will not access it directly off of the trail. They'll be coming from somewhere else. You would drive to Holliston. If there's a dog park in Holliston, people are gonna drive to Holliston to use the dog park. Many will come off the trail, but many more will come by car. And so how are we gonna build that safe access to this space? And how are we gonna protect trail users who are passing through, all of that sort of stuff, that infrastructure sort of stuff. I feel like that's one of the most important responsibilities of this board moving forward. John and Ben could feel completely different, but I think we would all agree that there's a clear mandate, if that's the right word, from the survey, at least from the survey respondents to move forward. So I'm curious to hear what my fellow board members have to say. I spent a lot of time looking over this data. I love a good survey, and I thought this was a pretty good survey just in terms of the numbers that responded, so.
Me first?
Yeah, go for it.
I also like the survey a lot. Getting nearly 600 respondents is a pretty good sample. So thanks to you and Chris for putting together a nice product. It's interesting because when you look at it, there does appear to be a strong interest in a pump track, as well as other options, which I hadn't even thought about. So that's the beauty of the survey. You get a lot of that input. I would echo almost everything Tina said. I mean, when you think about options, the first thing I want to think about is liability. Have you had any conversations with MAII?
No, I have,
MAA, whatever.
yeah, Maya. Our liability insurance carrier is Maya, yeah, and I can run these suggestions by them. I'll say, I have cited a dog park in my past municipal experience. There's a liability course we would run. I've never cited a pump
Did you say
track.
that was or was not? I couldn't hear.
There is, there's a liability when it comes to dogs, interacting with humans, with other dogs, those types of things. A pump track I've never had experience with. I'd have to go out to them, so I can bring that information back certainly. Okay. Even quite honestly, I think those are probably the two most active forms for this site compared to a rest area or some of the other ones. But even a rest area, believe it or not, is gonna, liability. So I'd be happy to get that information.
To the best of your knowledge, when we cleared that land, finally, and got it decontaminated from the product that it was, if I recall correctly, that included about a 6-inch cleaning or scraping of potential ACM. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, so we have no idea of any kind of construction or infrastructure improvements on that property can be done. If somebody want to start putting pilings or anything into the ground to anchor anything, we don't know if there's any restrictions on that.
I have not talked to DEP about that.
Okay. So it's not a DEP site, is it?
We interacted with DEP when the site was cleaned. I don't believe DEP has anything to do with it at the moment.
I go back to the conversation. I already forget the gentleman's name who was in favor of the pump track. He came before us a couple of times. Very strong advocate, obviously, and he indicated that he had originally spoken with the Parks and Rec folks about a similar park, and didn't get too far for whatever reason, and I don't know what that is.
I think he's Lewis.
Okay, great. And one of the things that I'd be interested in knowing is going back to that, because when I think of the pump track, I think of it in a large park environment. We have multiple recreational things happening simultaneously. And I recall talking about the options for this space being complementary to the recreational use of the rail trail. So in my mind, it's not complementary, it's a little different. And a pump track would work a lot better in one of our large parks like Stoddard, where there's a lot of room for it. But I think I need more information about what the site can present with respect to any kind of disturbance of the soils, and then also, of course, any kind of liability warning signs. You know, if Maya gets back to me and says, well, if you do this, it's gonna be this, and if you do this, it'll be this. That's meaningful. That'll drive a lot of the decision making, I think, but I'm excited by the interest in the property, like Tina said. We're onto something here. We knew it at the time. It's a great location. And I think whatever we end up doing will be a benefit to the community. So thanks again.
Can I just add to that? So, I mean, I know that this is a property that's obviously under your purview, town-owned property. It's not owned by the Parks Commission. It's related to the rail trail, which again is under your purview. But because of the ways, and I think, you know, Mr. Cronin just highlighted some of them, that this can interact, especially some of the data that we got and the suggestions that we got with what the parks is doing and their mission. Does it make sense to sort of loop them in that regard to this? I know we sort of went in this direction. We wanted to get the information for you all to have, but does it make sense in that? And that one of the suggestions that has the most feedback, positive and negative, that, you know, we may be saying one of the better suggestions for it may be the parks, right? Does that make sense to loop them in now?
I think it would. I mean, if it's a recreational activity and we want to satisfy all interests, we should work with them, find out what those barriers were. I cannot recall what the gentleman told us about his comments with Mark, but let's just loop Mark in and find out what was that all about.
Could
Was it
you,
money? Was it location? What was it?
I remember the paywall of the park was one aspect of it, but I don't recall exactly what the end result was.
could we look to schedule then an agenda item with Mark here?
Sure.
After he's had some time to look over the information?
Absolutely.
That would be a good step
Can
forward.
I
Yeah,
jump in a little
please,
bit
yeah,
too? I think
absolutely.
just a couple things, and I'll go it up on my own order. To just piggyback a little bit on what John was saying with moving the parks in, is I think one of the questions we need to consider is sort of long-term, regardless of the use, is like, how is this space maintained? I mean, this is something that we've talked about with like rail trail and things like that, is that, you know, is it a park's function to take care of these things? I don't know. And I think that's a deeper conversation, but I think whatever we decide for a use, we need to sort of come to an understanding of like, you know, we don't want to build something nice and pretty and then not have anybody to take care of it. You know, we want to make sure that we have sort of long-term plan for that. And I do want to echo a couple of comments you made, Tina, about access. How do people get to this particular parcel? It seems like I haven't been there in a while, but it's not a lot of great access from the road. It's pretty decent access from the rail trail, if I remember correctly. And I think, I mean, and what does that look like? Does it need to be expanded? Does it need to be looked at or something like that to make sure that we can get to it, people can get to the space for the use that is determined by the town? And then also, is it a safe place? You know, can the police get to it quickly? You know, is there a good access there? And then one other thing to mention is the fact that some of the uses that have been mentioned, something like an amphitheater or some of the other things, maybe being addressed with Blair Square. Some of the projects, the way the plans are coming forward, but, you know, and being finalized, some of those uses would actually dovetail into some of the things that are already going to be potentially with the uses of Blair Square.
Well, and to that end, I would say this board also has a role to connect those dots. Not every respondent here is going to know, to your point, about what's
Absolutely.
going on at Blair Square, what's going on at Blair Square.
Absolutely.
So this information could be then shared with the chair of the Blair Square committee for him to send out to the consultant as well as his own committee for them to take a look at and provide feedback. Okay. So for sure, future agenda item where we can get some feedback on MIAA's response, have Parks and Rec join us and hopefully have some input back from the Blair Square committee. There may be pieces they want to pull out or push off.
They're having a meeting next week, and I can just make sure that they're at least aware of the stuff that's being discussed here.
Okay. All right. So any other comments, John? or Ben? Okay. I see a hand up, so I see it as Joshua. So go ahead, introduce yourself, name and address, and hear what you have to say.
Hi, yeah, it's Josh Solberg again from 101 Shaw Farm Road.
Nice to
in
see you.
Beautiful Holliston. I'm the pump track advocate. Thank you all for addressing the issue of the Woodland Street question again. I wanted to piggyback upon a couple of questions or comments that were made and maybe answer a couple to the extent that I can. First, the discussion about whether to be a pump track, whether to be a park, whether to be a skate park. I have visited the site a couple of times, and in my opinion, as someone who's kind of been to a lot of pump tracks, skate parks, it can be both a pump track and a small skate park that are kind of combined into one thing, like the town of Holliston has done, right on the edge of Cambridge, Holliston, with an area for like sitting and resting for the rail trail. There's enough space there for all that stuff. I don't know how parking would be dealt with if all three of those things were to be put in that location. There might even be space enough for parking if I guess it's an easement that goes from Woodland through that. If that were made available for traffic, I don't know what kind of concern that would be for the rail trail, but it's at least conceivable to have parking there as well. But I really think that it's big enough to be kind of a combination skate park pump track for the kids, and then maybe like splash pad, small park area for smaller kids or, you know, individuals who are just on the rail trail and needing a place to sit for a minute. It really it can do all three of those things for sure. It's big enough. With respect to the liability question, obviously that's something that you're going to have to address with your insurance provider, but having dealt with a couple of other municipalities in the past, these were in Rhode Island, but my understanding is at least in Rhode Island and at least in some parts of Massachusetts, basically all municipalities are covered by the same insurer, and the policy is the same in almost every instance, insofar as it says, as long as it's not a competitive enterprise, like a BMX competition track or something like that, or a competitive skate park, the general liability policy in essence covers whatever happens. It's just like any other park. Like I said, that's something you're obviously going to check on, but that's been my understanding of it from dealing with other municipalities like Cumberland, Rhode Island, Providence, Rhode Island, and I think I talked to Cranston's town manager about it as well. And with respect to my interactions with the park department, the reason that we didn't find a space in one of the pre-existing public parks, Potoma, the problem was that the plot that we'd found, which was an abandoned basketball or tennis court, is used by the camp during the summer. So it'd be essentially not able to be used during most of the summer. And then Stoddard Park, there's a beautiful spot for it. The problem with Stoddard Park is it's a parking lot that's paid parking, you know, all through the summer. And it's also a lot that's essentially full a lot of the time. So it probably wouldn't be able to accommodate the people that wanted to visit the pump track / skate park anyways. And the requirement of paid parking would cause another issue. So we found this site. I actually found this site, and that was kind of like the end of conversation with Parks Department, because Woodland site was just too perfect in my estimation. So that's the just kind of additional information that I wanted to bring to you guys.
That's helpful, Josh. You clearly have a vision for the whole community. I love how you've heard the other comments that were made, and you know, you're presenting an idea in which you're addressing some of them. I think you can appreciate that the board has to do the due diligence, where we're going to potentially go to town meeting for an appropriation for any work here, including to start with a design plan.
Absolutely.
We've got to do our due diligence. So bear with us. Don't give up hope.
Oh, I won't. And
yeah.
I've reached out to and gotten some contact and communication with several skate park builders / pump track builders. So I have resources at your guys' disposal if and when you need them.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I think we have, again, some due diligence to do up front on our part, but I think you hear from all of us here that there's a strong motivation, and also hear from 600 other residents that there's a strong interest in doing something there. So we'll get there. We'll get to a future reuse that is best for the.
All right, great.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
so we're gonna move on then to, unless there are any other comments about 260 Woodland Street, but seeing none, we're gonna move on to comments from the town administrator.
Okay. Couple things, I mentioned just briefly earlier, the town has had communication with a few neighboring communities that are interested in having issues with, staffing their dispatch, having all sorts of operational issues, and are looking for some to optimize those services areas. I was engaged by a few other communities, sat down with them, and the end result was at this moment to be part of a funded study by E911 to look at our dispatch and our neighboring communities. And so at this point, once I have a timeline, I'll bring that back to the board. But again, at no cost, no direct cost to the town. It's something that, is one component that I think the town should always be looking at on a periodic basis. Chief Cassidy was able to show me the last one that was done, and we'll be able to provide that whenever the Collins Center does get underway on that. So excited to have one component of the study, organizational study, underway at no direct cost to the town. Another thing on a study that was already commissioned, we will schedule, and I will, as soon as I have a version for you to review, have the Stantec sidewalk study scheduled for August 16th at your regularly scheduled meeting. We'll bring them in. Sean Reese will be with us. We'll make sure that we get any questions that are answered at that time before they finalize their contract. But have a good, time to have them present their findings, have some back and forth with the board if there's any questions that are outstanding at that time, allow those to be buttoned up before we end our engagement with them. So Stantec sidewalk study scheduled for August 16th. And I do not have a final date, but we discussed obviously earlier that the Stantec water modernization study is also due. And once I have that date, I'll update you. Two other just scheduling things before I get into the biggest component here. So I'll start chronologically. Tomorrow, the capital subcommittee starts meeting. Vin Murphy, I believe, is with us, is the chair of the capital subcommittee. And I will be with them tomorrow, late afternoon, evening. As we sort of progress now that the warrant is open, and update our capital assumptions from May into October. And then, and I'll bring back any communication, the liaison from the select board will still be Ben Sparrow. The comprehensive long range planning committee has its meeting on Wednesday. I will continue my role as chairing that, although at the top of the agenda will be to assign or will be for that committee to elect a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk. And go in whatever direction they see fit. But until that's happened, I'll still be guiding them. And that is Wednesday night at 7:30, although I don't know that Wednesday nights in the future will be their nights. That has been the 2 nights so far. So Wednesday, August 4th at 7:30, the Comprehensive Long Range Plan Committee will have their second meeting. I have a couple items to discuss when it comes to scheduling of this meeting. We can do under other business, I think we determined. So with that.
Charles, can I back you up for one quick second?
Sure.
And it's not to imply that the answer has to be, well, anyway, that there is an answer here, but will there be time for the capital subcommittee to consider the Stantec sidewalk study? Once it's finally approved or accepted or whatever by the board, will there be time for the capital subcommittee to consider that before the warrant closes?
So
Is that too tight of a timeline?
So what I have right now, obviously, is the 5-year capital plan that we published on the website previously, which alluded to multiple studies that were coming.
Okay,
That would impact the 5-year capital plan. The warrant is open through September 20th. And so, yes, it may allow, and it may be that, scale or scope requires us to have more time until May. I'm not sure until I see the study.
yeah, okay. I take that as a big maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But we'll have them
That's fine.
present to you on August 16th.
Yep.
We'll have the warrant open until the 20th.
Yep.
Right now,
Your meeting, this capital subcommittee is gonna meet weekly, bi-weekly, monthly?
I don't know the answer to that question.
All right. Thank you.
And so, all right, if we're gonna go through our scheduling later, the last thing I just want to do under comments from the town administrator related to a question that came up previously from the board is an update on dams. And this is more of a primer to have a future and probably not too distant future, again, based on the timeline of town meeting conversation on the dams. So where we are at the moment, I provided a little bit of an update. The previous town meeting approval for funding has gotten us back in compliance with the state. We had an inspection that was overdue, that is now within, we're now in compliance with DCR in the state. We also have some EAPs, emergency action plans, that are due in the next 2 weeks to us, which will complete one phase of the contract that we have with Leonard. I've heard that pronounced Leonard, but I'm gonna continue to say Leonard. So within that contract that you all executed within the last year, we had phase one as a follow-up on the Houghton Pond Dam, 2 follow-ups for Factory Pond, 2 follow-ups for Winthrop, for a total of 6 inspections. Again, all of those, the final of that contract will be complete by November 2021. What we are looking at now that we're back in compliance, and this is sort of what I'd like to discuss with you, but more again, looking to a future agenda item, is that we're now in position on at least one of these dams to be having inspections every 6 months. I mean, there's going to be a financial impact to the town if we want to continue steady state. I understand from, my direction from the board in the past is that that's certainly not what you're looking for, but just for some context, the status quo is probably not a viable option for the town. So as we wrap all those up, they've now reached out, I believe, to the emergency management director for their final component of where they are, as they can finalize their EAPs. So the next step is really going to be to avoid every 6-month inspections on these dams. Will be to get the dams, quote unquote, into shape, is the direction that we received from the state. So I think we're ready now to pivot into what that looks like. So obviously a fix could be a capital project. I know it has been at least floated to me from multiple people that one fix people would like to at least discuss is removal and going back to natural state. I don't know, quite honestly, how realistic that is, but I think it's one component of the conversation. And so my suggestion at this stage, now that we have the information coming in from Leonard and we're ready to pivot to the next, major discussion, is to have a member of the select board, myself, the sustainability coordinator, the emergency management director to my right, and then the conservation agent and a member of the Concom put together a bit of a working group to look at all of the suggestions that come from these EAPs. Try to put together some numbers, as was the conversation mentioned earlier by Mr. Sparrow, and determine certainly where our priorities lie. The condition report probably will dictate that for us, quite honestly, but at the same point, priority for the town is going to be determined through the select board. And then report back in a pretty quick turnaround time to the board on recommendations for next steps now that we're in compliance. So that would be my suggestion, is to put together that working group as I've outlined it, or any other suggestions from the board to report back in the coming weeks on an agenda item.
I like the way you outlined the working group. I'm just looking to see who is liaison to Sustainability and Conservation Commission for the board. I see my name.
Me too.
And then I see my name. So unless John or Ben object, I would put myself in as a select board member for that working group that you propose.
And I did discuss with the conservation agent, I think there's quite a bit of expertise he feels on his committee that would be very good for this, depending on their availability.
Great.
And we also, the sustainability corner, I believe, when we had Matt Zedek and Ryan Clapp with us at a previous meeting, indicated, that we have had a couple meetings with the past dam safety officer, which is a previous volunteer position for the town, to make sure that we have all of the information that they had at that time. That individual's name was Karen Fung, and before her was Paul Sonia.
Okay. For a little context, with the extreme weather we had in July, Did any of our dams get close to, I don't want to use the word failing because that sounds really dramatic, but did we have any flooding in any of the areas of these dams in town with that heavy rain that we saw last month?
We received quite a bit of calls related to water levels. I would say that the most urgent one as it relates to being close to a dam was actually related to a beaver dam in the area of one of the dams.
So they held,
But we are,
okay.
yeah, we are constantly monitoring these, and the ones that are in poor condition are certainly in poor condition.
So any discussion from John or Ben?
Good.
I think you had everything.
Okay, so you'll move forward with the working group and organize that.
I will put that together, yep.
Okay.
And we'll have, we'll just continue to get all the information, obviously, to the select board, and then once we have a full agenda item, we'll put that on a future agenda item and maybe potentially have something to discuss even as early, or for early ARPA group potentially, or for fall time.
Thank you.
And that's all I have.
Okay, so then if there are any other questions for the town administrator? Go ahead and raise your hand, but I don't see any, so we're gonna move on to board business. And John, you've got a packet there, it looks like.
I do. The first item is a donation from Aroni Landscape and Design Incorporated to the Blair Square Committee, Trails Committee. It's a garden at the Upper Charles Trail parking lot at Railroad Street. It's a matching grant of $2,636 for labor and materials to create the garden and install it. Make a motion to accept this in-kind match.
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye. Second one is a donation to the Senior Center from the Holliston Lions Club. Very generous donation of $1,000 to the Senior Center Gift Fund 285541-453-20. I'll make a motion to approve that donation.
I will second that motion.
All in favor? Aye.
Moving on to the alcoholic beverage, keep going.
Yes, please.
All right. So we have a request for a one-day alcoholic beverage license by the Holliston Historical Society for wine and beer at the Jillian and Berkowitz concert, August 8, 2021, at the Holliston Historical Event Barn. The hours of the event will be 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m.
Motion,
I will second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
That carries, okay, next.
Next over. So the next item is a block party on September 25th, 2021. This appears to have been approved by Chief Stone in the Holliston PD for an event from 4:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. As I said, Saturday, September 25th, a neighborhood block party on Rolling Meadow Drive. Motion to approve that.
I will second it with a comment that there's a rain date of October 5th.
All in favor? Aye. All right, next.
Just looking for where that rain date is.
Oh,
Ben.
I'm sorry.
It says a date of event. It's the police department permit.
There it is, it's sort of, okay, there, right, got it. And the next item is another event for Frankie's Turning 2 Party at 100 Exchange Street. They would like a permit for parade, procession, or similar event from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. Exchange at Water to Exchange at Winthrop Street. It's basically kids riding bikes, playing with sidewalk chalk.
Entertain a motion?
So moved for the event on August 14th, 2021 at 100 Exchange Street neighborhood.
Motion,
I will second that motion.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, don't we all want to be Frankie?
Yeah.
Okay, next is a contract amendment for PAR. Travis, do you need to do any introduction on that, or is the motion clear and just go ahead and that I think we just pretty straightforward.
Provide a motion to the clerk, or I can read it if that's easier. Just some background. Actually, so I'll read the background on it
Yeah.
before we get to it. So just for context, before the clerk reads through it, the original appropriation for 9 Green Street design engineering was $54,900. So to date, $13,590 has been expended with a remaining balance of $41,310. So what we essentially have done here is do some contracts as we go, and this is an amendment to the next step. We have par with us, I believe, on July 12th to present to the select board on where they are. And then included in this contract amendment is sort of the next steps that his name is Al Hanscom laid out to the board at that time.
Great, thank you.
So you want me to make the motion?
Yep, go ahead. We'll take it.
Amendment number 1, Travis?
Yes.
Move to amend the original contract with Par Corporation for the design engineering of 9 Green Street for an additional $24,500 for 4 additional tasks. Number 1, septic system sampling. Number 2, bidding contract documents. Number 3, bidding phase services. And number 4, construction phase services. Note of the $54,900 appropriated for Green Street, $13,590 has been expended with a remaining balance of $41,310.
John, before you make that motion, Travis, a real quick question. This is, it's gonna be over 60 days, right? That's, it was 30 versus 60. This represents bidding over 60 days.
Yes, this is the longer period that Al felt would get us more competitive pricing.
What's that, John?
Motion to approve the amendment as read.
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Meeting minutes from July 12th, 2021.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, that carries. And then we have a motion.
Final item here, we're going to postpone this until the town planner and highway superintendent are all set. There was a little delay, so we jumped the gun by putting it on the agenda.
Thank you. Okay, so then we're gonna close board business and move on to our last item, which is other business. John, any other business for this evening?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Ben?
No other business.
Okay, I have one, which is dates on the calendar here. So John and Ben just need your okay with canceling August 9th. We already had that we were canceling our regular, we were canceling any select board meeting the week of 9/6, Labor Day week. And so there's a second canceled meeting for next Monday, August 9th. And that's one. The second, so just your feedback on that. Did you want to have the night free next Monday?
Sure, no, the only question I have, Travis, just to confirm, if you need warrants signed, we come in and sign the warrants, we don't have to convene a meeting to endorse any warrants, correct?
No, we would either come to you or you come to us to sign it, and then we put it on the next week's agenda.
I have no objection to it.
Great.
That's fine with me.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, because that means, you know, a trip to town hall for you, but a vacation for me, so I appreciate that. And then the second date is, again, we'd already canceled the week of Labor Day. Would be regularly scheduled for 8/23, Monday, 8/23. I am also away that day. Wondering if you gentlemen are available Thursday, August 26th.
Yes.
I will have to check the calendar. Give me 1 second.
And then I'm on that next Monday, which is the 30th, but because that next week is off due to Labor Day and the Jewish holiday, I don't know that you'll be able to cancel August 30th. You may have to soldier on without me.
Yeah.
But
we
this
were
would
planning
sort
to.
of allow the, not to skip too many.
You had mentioned that John Amazi would be able to fill us in, so. So it's the 20.
Who pitch hits for you when you come? Who would you appoint to sit there? This might be fun.
I know that Donna will not be on screen.
Oh, hell no. No. She's a back row person.
I will dust off my plum shirt.
I would prefer.
Maybe a salmon shirt.
Oh, this will be fun.
So the 26th is the.
Yeah, 26 should be fine.
All right, so then we're gonna change our regularly scheduled meeting August 23rd to Thursday, August 26th. I did check the town website. There are no other posted meetings at this point in time. I think everybody else maybe takes August off. Plugging away. All right, that was the only other business. Do you need motions for those, Travis, or we just go ahead and? make the schedule changes. They're just schedule changes. So,
We can work this.
all right,
I do have one thing to go after that, if you don't mind.
please, I'm all set.
So because we won't meet next week, it would be advantageous for us to continue for the DPW feasibility, the feasibility study of a DPW facility. If the board would authorize myself to execute a contract, we are at a point where the facilities manager has done the reference checks on two what were very competitive responses to our design procurement under 7C. And we are at a point where we could talk numbers and be ready to execute a contract. That would normally be something we would post under board business next week. If you are willing to authorize me to do so, again, the motion would read essentially that I would stay within the appropriation, and then we would put it on a future agenda so that, you know, we have it wrapped up in that way.
You had a formal review of the submitted proposals and they were scored by a team.
Yes, so the DPW director, the facilities manager, and myself reviewed the three responses that we had. Two of them were excellent, I will say, and they're ones that have done facilities in our proximity. So the facilities manager was able to talk to our sort of direct colleagues in the neighboring communities on some very recent projects. Got feedback, had a clear favorite, although the under 7C procurement, we are able to discuss pricing once that selection process has gone through. So it would be to determine the final price, have the contract, which would be reviewed by MTC, and then executed under appropriation.
Shall I make the motion?
Yes, please.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the town administrator to execute a contract on behalf of the select board for a feasibility study of a potential DPW facility for at or below the town meeting appropriation of $75,000.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Travis.
There you go.
Okay, so that is the end of our meeting agenda. I was hoping we'd come in under 9 o'clock, 9:01. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at 9:01 PM.
So
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Holliston. We will see you again on August 16th. Have a good night.